Okay, Brandon Aiyuk. Keep or trade? What would you do?
Trade.
You would?
Absolutely.
Why?
Because you can replace what he does in the draft, and you could get maybe a first-round pick for him. You could get maybe a first-round move-up. You could get a chance to restart your clock on wide receiver. You got Juwan Jennings, who you can re-sign, and Aiyuk is going to be expensive. And do you really want to pay 2 wide receivers top dollar when you're a team that doesn't really throw the ball that often? You threw the ball less than any other team in football this year. You were 32nd in pass attempts. So do you want to pay 2 receivers more than $25 million a year when you're a team that doesn't throw the ball?
Well, but maybe you are going to throw the ball more next year.
I don't believe that.
Why not?
Because I don't believe that Kyle Shanahan wants to.
Again, why wouldn't he? He was
because you have the best running back in football, and you have a fullback, and you have a tight end that you use, and you spread the ball around a lot.
Right, but again, I would actually argue that there have been some clues that Kyle would like to throw the ball more. I seem to remember, you help me, I seem to remember a bunch of voices. They were just kind of from everywhere in my life. Maybe I was just dreaming this, but it felt like
it was all a dream.
Felt like people were really mad at Kyle Shanahan for dropping back in the third quarter of a recent football game a little bit too much. But I would argue that in the NFL in 2024, you better. There's no more 3 yards in a cloud of dust, and a defense, if they are fully invested on stopping Christian McCaffrey, and you can't offer an alternative, they'll beat you. They'll stop him. You can't. You can't just run the ball. And I do think that the Kyle Shanahan we've watched call plays is the Kyle Shanahan who had Jimmy Garoppolo as his quarterback, followed by an offseason of preparation where he didn't even know if his starting quarterback would be healthy. So he thought there was a chance that Sam Darnold, for at least half a year, was going to be his quarterback. So why wouldn't you center it around Christian McCaffrey? Don't ever forget that he was the offensive coordinator of a quarterback who won the MVP of the league. So then they threw the ball a ton. So
but that's not these teams. These teams, he was one of 3. They were one of 3 teams this year to run it more than they passed it.
Well, they had an elite Julio Jones. I'll grant you that, but maybe does that not lend to the conversation we're having? Here's what I'd say. I totally get what you're saying, but boy, be careful. Be careful with the whole, you can replace Aiyuk. No problem. Okay.
He's more replaceable than Nick Bosa, Trent Williams.
Agreed.
Christian McCaffrey.
Agreed.
George Kittle.
Agreed.
He's more replaceable than any of those guys.
But doesn't make him replaceable. It's not automatic.
No.
Remember when DeForest Buckner was replaceable? But he wasn't.
He was.
He wasn't.
And you made it to the Super Bowl.
And you didn't win it. And the guy that you...
that was Kyle's fault.
Thank you.
Exactly.
And the guy that you replaced him with has been much more disappointment than not. No?
Eric Armstead?
Kinlaw.
Oh, yeah.
You drafted Kinlaw to replace him.
Right.
And he is largely...
And you brought in Hargrave because Kinlaw hasn't worked out.
Right.
And Kinlaw, Hargrave was good, but not as good as Buckner's been. But the point is you can't pay everybody in every position.
You're right.
So you made a choice at defensive tackle, and you chose Armstead, and that got you to a Super Bowl. Right or wrong, that's the choice you made. I don't think that you're going to be able to pay Debo and Aiyuk both north of 20 and still be able to keep everyone.
Why don't you trade Debo?
Because Debo doesn't have the same trade value. Debo's already got a salary that's higher, and I think that Debo is much more, fragile's unfair, but Debo gets hurt a lot more than Aiyuk.
Are you sure that Debo's salary is higher? Understand that anybody who acquires Brandon Aiyuk, an extension will go along with that acquisition.
Right.
Which means you would get Aiyuk cheaper than Debo for 1 year, but then you're going to owe him a lot more. Debo right now is the number 7, I think. Number 7 paid wide receiver.
23.8
exactly
is the
right.
average.
Right. There are 13 receivers that make $20 million or more. And Debo is right in the middle, and Brandon will join that group. But
will he make more than Debo or as much as Debo?
Gosh,
let's say he makes 25.
Okay.
And Debo's at 23.8.
Yep.
He averages 25. Well, you have a year where he's not going to be paid 25, so you get that 1 year where he's making 14.
But then you have more years on the back end. Maybe you want Debo, and it's essentially a short-term deal. It's 2 years.
Yeah, but Debo's not as good as Aiyuk. And Debo...
At what?
at being a receiver.
Right, but he does a bunch of other stuff.
For this offense. If you don't run this offense, you're not going to, like a lot of teams don't give the ball to the receiver like Kyle gives it to the receiver.
Right, but they certainly can. I mean, sometimes I think we look at play callers in the NFL and we act like they're so robotic. Like, well, this is what I do. No, like you see what your personnel is, and then you go from there. Like any play caller, if Jalen Hurts was your quarterback or if Jared Goff was your quarterback, like ask Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson runs the offense with the Lions. They were a very good offense this year. Do you think he's calling the same plays? What if Jalen Hurts were his quarterback? What if Kyler Murray were his quarterback?
Right.
He'd adjust. So, like, I think Debo would be a damn interesting piece for a lot of teams. I think we talked about it when he was scrubbing his Instagram. The Jets would love to have him. Jets would love to have Debo Samuel. So, and again, I'm just throwing that out there. I think you bring up a real good point. Debo gets hurt a lot. You know, so if it comes down to that, where you decide we got to get rid of one of them, okay, let's see what the market is calling for out there. But also, I would assume it's like 16 games of Aiyuk versus 12 of Debo.
Right.
That's what you're comparing, because that's probably what it would look like, don't you think?
That's what it feels like is the norm. Debo gets hurt, and Debo misses games, and I do think that Aiyuk is a better route runner, and I look forward to hearing what Bucky has to say about exactly what he means about him running routes. But if I'm a team out there and I have my choice between the two, I'm taking Brandon Aiyuk without a doubt.
Gosh, here's the thing. I've gone back and forth on this all week long, ever since Brandon was crying and his girl was on TikTok and his brother was on IG. I've been going back and forth on this all week. And so I don't want to come in with some sort of a like fluff ball opinion, but at the same time, it's evolving as we speak. I'm with you. I really want to hear what Bucky has to say about this. I really want to hear what Peter King has to say about this, and I'd love to know what the Niners are thinking, because here's where I go back and forth. I think we're conditioned to look at what Patrick Mahomes just did with no special receivers, what Tom Brady did for years with no like truly great receivers. I know there was the Edelmans and things like that, Randy Moss, but they didn't win with him. Like, those teams did not spend big at wide receiver. You know who spends big at wide receiver? The Miami Dolphins. And boy, aren't they great for football, as long as you put the word fantasy in front of it. Not real football. So, in theory, what you're saying, I would agree with it. The wide receiver position is largely replaceable. ... Do you really think that the San Francisco 49ers traded up for a first-round draft pick to grab this guy, then hold him accountable for a year and a half, then turn him into a 1,300-yard receiver who spent the offseason working directly with Brock Purdy so that they could build unbelievable chemistry, and as soon as it gets to go time, trade him? Gosh, that feels tough.
Repurpose it. I mean, the Warriors traded Jordan Poole, and I know there's more backstory to that,
sure,
but you had Jordan Poole, a first-round pick that you coached up, you sent him down to the G League, you brought him back, you nurtured him, he was a part of a championship team, you gave him a contract extension, you went on the record saying that, yeah, he's going to be here for a number of years, and then you traded him. It's a cold world. Shout out J. Cole.
Yeah.
And I look at a team that runs the ball more than they pass the ball, and I do believe that that's Kyle's preference, and you're really going to pay two receivers $25 million a year? I just don't see it.
You're probably right. I don't see it either.
For me, it'd be better to trade him, get a second first-round pick, get a tackle, get another receiver, and pay a guy $6 million a year to do mostly what Brandon Aiyuk can do.
It's such a fascinating pickle. It really is. Like Jimbo just hit us on YouTube and goes, wide receivers are devaluing like the running back position. I'd argue it's the exact opposite. Tyreek Hill just got $30 million.
Right.
And the market went crazy.
Well, the top of the market's different than the rest of the market.
Understood, but Christian Kirk, as we've talked about repeatedly, went out there and got 18. Christian Kirk got 18. He makes more than Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah.
Which Christian makes more? Kirk.
Well, that's
not
like
McCaffrey.
3 years ago now, or 2 or 3
Right,
years ago.
but I
do
mean-
think that the market is starting to settle in terms of that.
Well, it's double the running back.
For sure.
It is double the running back, and I don't see teams like holding wide receivers out there like, yeah, we're not going to do it. No, I see Miami giving up a haul. I see Philadelphia giving up a haul for A.J. Brown. I see DK Metcalf and Debo holding their team's feet to the fire and making them pay. Like, I don't see the wide receiver position being devalued. I see the opposite.
But depends on where you think Brandon Aiyuk is. Is he a top-of-the-market guy? Does he go somewhere and become their immediate one? Or is he a really good 2 on a good team?
I think he's going to be paid as a top 10 receiver. And you can make a hell of a case based on
Well, then there's no way they should pay him as a top 10 receiver because you're already paying Debo as a top 12 receiver.
It's top 7.
Right.
It's number 7.
You're going to pay 2 of those guys? That's a losing approach.
Seems like bad business with ... 12 months from now, another little contract to handle that
possibly
goes by the name of Brock Purdy.